Chapter 5. Doosmus.
Intergalactic Dating, profile match, #117394. Yoko, planet of origin, Habridats, species, Habridats, age 24, local planet dating, position, ensign, eyes, sunken, skin colour, grey, characteristics, extremely squeaky, likes, adventure, boldly going, vegetables, favourite colour, blue, most likely to rescue someone while still hiding under a table. English, planet of origin, Habridats, species, Habridats, age, 2ish, local planet never got round to official time. Position, ensign, eyes, big, feather colour, white, characteristics, very soft and feathery, likes, adventures, maps, adventurous maps, favourite colour, blue, most likely to stuffed in with her own feathers, the landscape on.
Happy Doosmus Eve, everybody. This is the Captain's chocolate log on the SS Prize, part of the Intergalactic Wealth Federation. Stardate 7743-2-Raspberry/Jam Donut. Our destiny, to boldly and hungrily travel across the universe where no one has boldly gone before, discovering recipes that can help the future of Dewsbury giant kind. We left the launch pad several meal times ago with our fine crew of intrepid explorers made up of creatures from all over the universe, all part of our year-long mission to explore the infinity of space and write some cookbooks. Oh wait, that's the dinner bell. Be back soon. Captain's chocolate log supplemental. Earth custard goes really nice in the chocolate log. I must make a note of this in my log. Also, we seem to be picking up signs of an alien life form on the new planet we are orbiting, the one that's intriguingly shaped like a giant bagel. This is exciting news given that our festival with Doosmus is here this week, our celebration of the fact ourselves nearer to the planet Doosmus than at any other time, and we can have giant barbecues. This is our favourite time of year, our national holiday where we all get together and eat and try out new recipes from around the universe, and we hope to be home back in time with the speed of gas Mark 7 so we can catch the end of it with this our very last planet. I'm about to send my best crack team over to the planet's surface to explore. The half-Mechion, half-Dewsbury Lieutenant Spaghetti, Earth First Mate, Supermarket Checkout, Dewsbury Medical Officer, McCoy Crisps, and Engineer, Scottish Shortbread, plus our newest ensigns, Yoko Glabdahadi and Hamish Habitat, were on their first mission.
Is this where you want it, Captain?
Squeaked Ensign Yoko, who was puffing under the weight of a gigantic instrument that looked like a microwave. As the only Glabdahadit on the ship and one of the junior members of the crew, she was always getting overlooked. She also wondered to herself frequently why she was doing all the heavy lifting when the Dewsburys around her were so much older and, well, bigger. Still, she was too ambitious to speak about it out loud too much. She loved her job and dreamed that one day she might have a crew of her own to boss around.
Please say yes,
groaned Ensign Hamish, who was down the other end. Though he was a Habridat, he was bigger than his friend and colleague. He was still smaller than the Dewsburys, and his tendency of nodding off at certain moments meant that he was even more overlooked than she was. Hamish didn't grumble out loud either, but that wasn't because he was ambitious. The truth was he had a secret that he couldn't tell anybody, not even the person it concerned. He wanted to look good in her eyes, fully professional and able, so he didn't moan as much as other Habridats would have done in his situation as a general bird's body.
Aha,
said Spaghetti, raising an eyebrow.
our new power source is here at last. Let's plug it in over here.
He said, pointing his way back across the room.
Yes, sir.
Squeaked Yoko, trying her best not to roll up into a ball, a natural instinct of hers when it came to doing things she didn't want to do.
Oh no,
said Hamish.
not all the way back there again.
Spaghetti raised the other eyebrow.
I mean, straight away, sir.
He added. Hamish fiddled with the wiring.
I think that's how it goes in.
He said, more or less to himself.
To be honest, I rather fell asleep during the demonstration at the academy.
It fits.
Squeaked Yoko.
I'm sure it's right. As long as some power's going through it, I'm sure it doesn't matter if it's upside down.
Yippee!
Said Scotty Shortbread, the ship's engineer. This is a whole new navigational device that's never been tested before. Instead of warping the space-time continuum as we travel, which can be pretty dangerous, it merely heats the space around it slightly with microwaves. Clever, eh? It should get us home for Doosmus at top speed. Now give that thing here. Hamish passed his hand over with relief. Oh, Scotty continued, his hand slipping from his lunch. I canna hold her! I canna hold her! There, he continued, handing it back to Hamish. Isn't that better? Hamish shrugged. It was all the same to him how things worked. The warp drive was easier to carry, he puffed, unimpressed. Trust Miss Doosmus to make a meal out of things. Yoko, though, had done her homework.
That's amazing, sir.
She squeaked.
To think that with this power unit in place and powered by Candace-4 crystals, we could zoom around space 10 times faster. We'll be home before you can say, yep.
Not just that, said Scotty proudly. It can heat up a microwave meal in 10 seconds at the same time, without using any extra fuel. And he put some microwave rice into the machine.
Not it up ahead.
Eat your furrer, the only other Glabderhardit on board, who was the communications officer and Yoko's senior.
Oh, and it looks a bit of a nicely advanced civilization too. Just check out those skyscrapers.
Most of the crew gathered round a magnifying lens that had been attached to one of the portholes for a better view. Being the junior members, the console hadn't been designed for the ensign's height, so Hamish and Yoko merely pressed their beaks and furry noses up to the window and breathed in their first sight, perhaps anyone's first sight, of this new alien colony. Even though she was the Glabderhardit, and by nature should be running away scared to hide under a table, Yoko was in her element. She had always dreamed of seeing an alien planet that no one from the 11 species had ever stepped paw on before, and it looked every bit as wonderful and exotic as she'd imagined, full of blues and browns, with lush vegetation that would keep a Glabderhardit happy for years. She longed to be chosen for this mission, to prove herself daring and bold, and be heaped about on her home planet with pride once she got home, perhaps with another lapel on her tunic for good conduct. Somehow, despite his position and his naturally laid-back demeanour, Hamish was more than a little scared by the prospect of being sent to an alien planet. He had signed up expecting his cadetship to be more of a desk job, one where he could get away with a minimum of work like so many Habridats before him, and far from the opportunity of a lifetime he had been somewhat annoyed to find out that he and Yoko had been recruited to actually fly on the Doosmus ship, working at less than the intergalactic wage for no greater crime than being young. He hadn't enjoyed doing all the rotten menial jobs like washing up after the Doosmus giants and moving equipment, but at least so far he hadn't had to actually do anything important that he might have got wrong, and he could take a few sneaky naps with an ever-eager Glabderhardit next to him, always willing to volunteer herself for any job. Now, though, he worried that his nice quiet life was about to change. Hamish began to mould, as he always did when he was stressed, his feathers getting everywhere. Scotty raised an eyebrow as great patches of these feathers began to float freely around the room.
It wasn't me, sir,
said Hamish quickly, which was his automatic response whenever he looked as if he was about to get into trouble, before realising that he was the only one in the ship with feathers.
What I meant to say was, I didn't mean to, sir.
Hamish sighed as he was handed a dustpan and brush and started sweeping.
Super universal, sir.
He muttered.
So far I've mostly seen the cleaning facilities and the kitchen.
His fellow academy graduate didn't seem to have noticed as she continued to stare out the window.
It's beautiful,
breathed in Yoko.
Just look at all those tall buildings that reach up to the sky, so new, shiny and full of hope, all speckly and quirky, not like any other civilization skyscrapers. But they do remind me a little of the giant skyscraper tables that were built in our world before Glabderhardit realised that we didn't like heights and we were safer closer to the floor.
Habridats were never really that into building,
sighed Hamish snoozily, as he leant on the bin for a quick snooze.
We mostly lived in bungalows, if we ever finished our houses at all. Mostly we slept out in the open.
What would life be like down there, do you think, Hamish?
Intense and Yoko.
Do you think we'll be intelligent? Can we hold conversations with them?
Hamish scratched his beak.
You know, it's the strangest thing, but those buildings feel like there's something very argibraffe about them.
He pointed to the giant spots and stripes.
Just look at the skyscrapers. They're exactly the colours of our pets back home.
squeaked Yoko in excitement.
Do you suppose we've discovered the long-lost argibraffe civilization? They must have come from somewhere.
For in their part of the universe, the argibraffes are one of the biggest mysteries that had never been solved. They just turned up one day on Habridats, and the Habridats had let them have the run of their planet as if it was too much work to do anything about them. Before too long, argibraffes had been found stowing away on ships travelling to other worlds too, until before long they were found on 10 of the 11 inhabited planets, Agrosia being just a little too far away to travel. It was thought that a small party of explorer braffs must have travelled their way across the stars and ended up on Habridats more or less by accident, but given that the creatures weren't very talkative or sentient in their early days, and the Habridats weren't terribly curious, nobody had ever made a thorough investigation of them. What had confused many scientists, though, was just how adaptable these creatures seemed to be, with each one changing depending on the planet they had landed on. Some developed stripes, others spots. One group, that landed in Scotland Earth, had even, to Scottish shorebread's great delight, developed a tartan-like colouring.
Aha!
Cried Captain Cardamom, pleased enough by the sight of the planet in the porthole to break away from his breakfast.
Time to be down in our mission of recipe gathering. The usual away crew, get ready, and bring your trade recipes with you.
He paused a second.
Also, you ensigns, Yoko and Hamish.
Yes, sir.
Heaped Yoko eagerly.
What?
Asked Hamish, his wings in the pockets of his uniform. Waking suddenly, he had been leaning against the new teleport machine's buttons, and may have, just ever so slightly, knocked into them. An accident, he told himself.
You've carried out a number of duties for us now,
Said the captain.
Yeah,
Sighed Hamish.
washing up all your meals mostly. That takes forever. A month up here and I'm barely left for sick.
Well,
Beamed the Cardamom.
how would you like to beam down to this planet with the rest of the crew? Think of it as your reward for all the hard work. It's your job to collect the culinary foodstuffs while your senior officers communicate with these aliens, whatever they may be.
He handed a specially transcendentally dimensional Mechion knapsack to Yoko and a flask to Hamish for collecting samples.
That's amazing.
Squeaked Yoko dreamily.
Soon I'll be handling food from a different world.
Hamish wasn't so sure. He'd have preferred a quiet life washing up on the ship, but outwardly he nodded. Wherever Yoko went, he went too.
Absolutely.
He agreed.
Great.
Said the captain.
It's only a small mission, so I'm sure you'll be back in time for dinner. Now go and get changed into your red uniforms.
The rest of the crew looked at each other.
Not the red uniforms, sir.
Cried McCoys.
You know the superstition about wearing the red uniforms? No one wears them ever comes back. Oh, nonsense.
Said the captain, tucking back into his meal.
Besides, those are the only uniforms that fit. Plus we dropped our dinner down all the others.
Squeaked Yoko eagerly, her furry head peeking through a red tunic. Kitted out with chef's hat and apron, and the logo of a Starfleet uniform emblazoned on it. She had been waiting for this moment, to prove what she was capable of. Hamish shrugged, pushing his beak through his.
I'm as ready as I want to be too.
They both joined the other 4 crew members on the teleport ring, which was shaped like a giant donut.
Just have a scout around.
Once the Captain Cardamom.
They seem to be very basic travel life forms we're picking up, so I can't see you having too many problems. We should all be back on board ship in time for pudding.
Spaghetti raised an eyebrow.
All this food can't be good for you, Captain. It seems an illogical waste of supplies.
Nonsense.
Dismissed Cardamom.
Just because you're half Mechion, and you don't eat as much as the rest of us, you can't roll a ship on an empty stomach, and it was only a little snack to keep me going. Well, if you're all in place, our engineer Chief O'Frying will press the button to send you down.
The engineer saluted and cried,
Jocks away.
before holding down the giant toaster flap on the side of the control panel, which made a satisfying pop-up noise.
Wait,
Cried McCoy just as the captain was beaming them across to the mysterious planet's surface.
we nearly forgot our lunch. Everybody back out!
Cried Checkout in a panic, dragging the Mechion by the arm. The 4 senior members of the crew rushed off the teleporter ring in a panic just in time as the machine began to smoke and explode, the space toaster ejecting pieces of half-cooked bread as it did so.
This mania for lunch at the risk of our lives is illogical.
Spaghetti raised an eyebrow, and his left ear.
Oh dear,
Said Captain Cardamom, picking his teeth with a clandesprod knitting needle he liked to use as a giant toothpick.
It looks as if a button had already been pressed. Sorry. Good job you all got out in time. It would have been awful if you missed your lunch. Not all of us made it out,
said ship's counsellor, Troy me and by me.
I am picking up great signs of confusion from 2 new life forms that have just arrived on the ship's surface. One feathery, one furry. Also a general feeling of hunger across the ship that means it's nearly tea time.
Oh no, cried Scotty as he threw himself at the controls, switching the levers back and forth. Lots of lights went on and off, and the Zagrosian crystals which powered the ship groaned and buckled under the weight of the energy beam. But it was all to no avail. I'm sorry, said Scotty. I think our ensigns have been lost to us.
This is awful news,
said the captain.
And so close to lunchtime as well. I can't think what to do on an empty stomach. First officers, let us confer.
I think we should fly down to the planet's surface in a shuttle,
said Spaghetti.
Nonsense,
said the ship's robot Input, who secretly longed to be human.
That would be highly illogical. We don't know what's down there.
Well, leaving 2 inexperienced crew members to face whatever is down there alone would be even more illogical,
argued the Mechion, raising a second eyebrow and his right ear.
Would not?
Would too.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
Please, said
Captain Picardimum.
I hate it when people disagree. It gives me indigestion. It's bad enough that my breakfast disagrees with me. There's only one thing we could do. Wait for our 2 ensigns to make radio contact. Now give me an English breakfast tea, hot. I don't like Earl Grey. But that could take hours,
explained Checkout.
We don't know what's down there. They could be in great danger. Oh, all right then,
sighed the captain.
Skip the tea if you have to. Just don't skimp on the biscuits. No,
said Checkout.
I've been waiting for our 2 youngest recruits to set up radio communications. They've not even completed basic training after all. They've never done anything without our supervision. Effectively, they're on work experience. It's going to be all right,
said McCoy.
Those 2 are pretty plucky. That Labdahar has got guts. She only hides under the table at very loud noises these days. And our Habridat is unflappable. They got good marks in their training under our previous officers' training scheme, when we weren't busy taking part in the Ferengi's off-world gambling. Oh,
said Picardimum.
Zulus? No, said
McCoy's.
Mine. And I usually won. Oh dear.
The captain's face fell.
I suppose this is going to create all sorts of horrible paperwork. That's really not good for my digestion either. All right, crew. Well, the best thing we could do for now is to monitor the situation, repair the transporter, and do everything we can to bring those 2 back to safety when it's safe to. In the meantime, let's break for lunch. I really fancy some nachos. Make it so.
Squeaked Ensign Yoko, who was upside down in the gorse bush with her tiny paws dangling in mid-air and crickling a furry nose.
This didn't happen during training. Where did everybody go?
I'm not quite sure,
said Ensign Hamish, stretching his feathery wings and unrolling himself from the shrubbery he found himself in.
We were on board the ship one moment, and then we were down here the next. But once there were 6 of us, and now we 2 seem to be alone. Did I doze off and miss something? Again?
Squeaked Yoko.
We volunteered for this mission. Well, I volunteered out of my sense of loyalty and duty and responsibility. And you didn't say no because you were asleep at the time, which amounts to the same thing. And we were beaming down to the planet's surface, and then at the last second everyone changed their minds and went back again. Only I was too paralysed by fear, by all the shouting, and you were asleep, so we didn't quite move fast enough.
Oh,
said Hamish.
I thought that was a strange dream.
He shrugged his shoulders.
I guess they'll come back down and get us when they're able to. They're pretty fierce warriors, these Doospry giants, when they want to be, especially when they're hungry.
But what if they can't rescue us?
Squeaked Yoko in an even higher-pitched voice than usual.
There seems to be an awful lot of smoke, and the Doospry ship's computers have frequently been outloaded by all those giant waffle makers and candy floss machines they have running all the time. We might be trapped here on this dangerous new world with lots of monsters and mad aliens and plastic rats that try to eat us. And I've just remembered, we're wearing the red jerseys of death.
She squeaked in terror and looked for the nearest table to hide under, before remembering that on undiscovered alien planets there were no tables. This made her feel worse. Hamish shrugged.
Well, if we do meet anyone, we could just tell these strangers about our mission. That we've been hired by the Doospry giants to go looking for intergalactic recipes, and we've been given a decent amount of credits to pay them for their cooking tips. It stands to reason that they'll want to help us out. Planets always do. Even the ones where the life forms want to kiss the captain.
Hamish pulled a face at the memory of the last troglodyte alien they had met. She'd been green and slimy with rubber lips, but the captain had seemed to quite enjoy it, he noticed. Hamish had another idea, though, and thought to himself, assuming these aliens also take intergalactic currency.
I'm still not convinced every planet in the universe uses food vouchers and gravy as an international bartering system, the way our captain seems to think.
He finished feebly.
But what if they don't want to give us their recipe?
Squeaked Yoko.
I mean, they might want to keep them to themselves, or, even worse, we don't actually know if they are civilized. They might want to eat us. The Doosmus giants are giving me an insight into how it feels to be bottom of the food chain.
Hamish shrugged.
I reckon I work best in a stew. You make a good dumpling.
How can you be so calm?
Squeaked Yoko. This is terrifying.
Oh dear, I wish I was back home under my table happy and safe. I knew this was a bad idea.
She began running round in circles. Hamish confessed.
I'm not that calm inside, really. I'm just trying to stay that way. It's what I learned from training. The calmer you stay and the longer you stay there, the more time you have to work out a way of saving your life. Inwardly, though, I'm fretting like you. Look.
He pointed to the large handfuls of feathers that had come off in his wings.
Oh,
Yoko.
I guess I'm so used to being the only scared creature around, I thought it was just me.
Hamish smiled back at her.
No, we just have a different way of channeling the same fears, that's all. Plus I do feel kind of better with you around to protect me.
Eat Yoko.
But I'm tidy. I'm terrified. What good am I protecting you?
Hamish grinned.
You'll find a way. I know you will. You're braver than you give yourself credit for, Ensign. Remember, I've watched you all the way through the academy, going through all the hardest tests they sent us. And even though you were afraid, you never backed down from the challenge once. You're more than up to this job, you know. You got the best marks of the academy out of anybody. I mean, I might have done too if they'd given me the 8 extensions of my coursework I asked for because of all the extra lines I needed. But you were amazing. You aced every test straight away. I fully believe in your ability to handle anything this planet can throw at us. In a tight spot, that's the sort of person I want in my corner. Someone who's terrified and understands the dangers, but who's brave and does the right thing in the end anyway.
Yoko stopped squeaking and running round in circles.
Thank you, Hamish.
She said.
You've always been so good at calming my nerves. You always know just what to say. It's good to know I can count on your help and support.
It's me you should worry,
Continued Hamish.
I don't have your brains or your guts. I'm probably going to fall asleep and get eaten.
He stretched and yawned.
There is much I can really do about it.
Stand by me.
Eat Yoko kindly.
I'm not going to let anything happen to you.
She considered a moment.
And if there's something scary around then, believe you me, I'll be letting you know about it with constant squeaking.
You've always been brilliant at being in charge and keeping me out of trouble, Yoko.
He said.
We make a good team. With you pushing me, I always know where I'm going.
He flashed a smile.
With you holding me back, I managed to have enough time to think before I act impetuously. Usually.
Squeaked Yoko. She looked up at him with a cute smile.
You know, I've never properly asked you, what made you come all this way? On such a dangerous mission, for a different planet and culture.
Hamish shrugged.
I don't really know. I guess it's a living. Something to do.
Yoko was aghast.
It's taken 8 years of training and 2 years work experience on the job, and you don't really know why you're here.
Hamish shrugged again.
I guess I just fancied the uniform. Something else.
He blushed and the tips of his feathers all turned exotic colours.
How about you? What makes a Time Rodent harder being a safe communal table to travel all this way into danger?
Yoko grinned.
I'm all about the ambition, me. I want my own space shuttle one day that I can command. We can scour the universe looking for leafy green vegetables. Maybe even a Galactic space station like the 8 that are out there already. I would call mine Deep Space Nine.
Hamish smiled.
I recall mine. Look at that!
He cried.
That's an odd name for a space station.
Yoko eat?
No,
Said Hamish, unusually animated for a Habridat.
would you look over there? Isn't that where the skyscrapers were before we beamed down?
Yes,
Squeaked Yoko.
but where did they all go?
In their place was a much smaller plateau of empty terrain, broken up only by the odd rustic and rusty-looking log cabins. Suddenly Yoko's extra high-tuned senses picked up something out of the ordinary as she stayed stock still, twitching, all her nerves jangling. She cried in fright.
What is it?
Whispered Hamish, who had always been impressed with his colleague's ability to sense danger quicker than any instrument.
Unknown life forms approaching from the west.
She squeaked, and looked around her hurriedly. She hadn't really taken in their surroundings before, but noted they were in what looked like a rocky landscape that was incredibly alien, and halfway up a small hill. Although she knew from training that it might just as well have been a quarry on Earth, which is what most alien planets look like. Across the valley, though, she could just make out some pale shadows. Hamish shrugged.
Well, there's nowhere to run. Maybe we should go over and say hello.
But Yoko grabbed him by the tail feathers and pulled him under the nearest rock. A number of strange beings, a cross between dogs, horses and giraffes with long snouts, who walked on all four legs, walked into the open.
Argibraffes,
said Hamish in surprise.
They really are argibraffes.
These creatures were different to any he'd seen before, though. These ones had extra long thin snouts and weedy bodies, but they'd clearly not had much food, and sturdy little legs built for running. Not like the stubby-limbed argibraffes with feathers of his home world. One or two raised their bowler hats, and what looked awfully like umbrellas over in their direction.
Glaze is ready,
said Yoko, holding out her paws in readiness, referencing the Dewsbury guns that didn't kill anyone, but did cover them in a sticky substance that stuck them to the ground so you could run away.
just in case.
I didn't pack any glaze phasers,
confessed Hamish.
Why not?
Yoko barked at him. He shrugged.
I forgot. It didn't seem very important.
Important? That's your job. Well, anything you've got then.
Yoko cried. Hamish felt around his pockets.
I've got a yo-yo,
he said.
What good would that do?
He shrugged again.
It might help pass the time.
Yoko groaned. She was used to covering for Hamish during training, but really there were times when she wanted to pluck out all of his feathers one by one.
What are we supposed to do then?
And she hissed. Hamish thought for a bit.
Things usually seem better after a nap,
he said, and closed his eyes.
Not now.
She said.
You're on Starfleet, so stay alert.
I could do alert,
he said.
Sort of.
Well,
said Yoko after some thought.
you do look benign, almost civilized in fact, and haven't threatened us yet. I suppose you should go over and talk to them, or try to at least.
Do you think I'll be able to understand us?
asked Hamish.
I should think so.
Oh, said Yoko, tapping the Mechion-built intergalactic translator in her pocket.
Don't you remember Class 5AC subsection J making contact with beings from another world?
Hamish shrugged.
I think I fell asleep in my class too.
Yoko replied.
Well, we have a gadget built by the Mechions that translates all speech given time, even that of new alien species. Anyway, trust me, this will work.
She thought for a moment.
Assuming these beings are civilized enough to communicate anyway. Although all those skyscrapers we saw from the shuttle seems to be a good sign of technology. I'm sure they were here on this patch of ground earlier. I wonder why they went.
She shrugged, a habit she had picked up from Hamish.
Oh well, I suppose this planet might be bigger than we thought, but it looked quite small from our shuttle. Well, they don't appear to have any weapons, and we're safe from them up here on this hill. I think we go and talk to the locals.
Hamish needn't have worried. These aliens both understood every word. Oh, charmed, called one, raising his hat. Visitors, I must say you're a bally long way from home, what? Rather, said the second. Dash sporting of you to visit us all the way out here, old bean. Well, toodle-pip, added the first. Can't stand here lollygagging all day. Moustache, I'm late for the office. Oh, rather, said the second, checking his digital watch. You can't afford to be late in a capitalist society, can you, me old pal, me old beauty? Is this the RG line to Braftall? Of course, nodded the other. We've been taking it enough years, haven't we, what? He turned round and looked disappointed. There, I say, I've dropped my bally old sandwiches again. Probably a blessing, my dear, said the other. You know what they're like from the food van. In the distance, a ginormous vehicle, a cross between a steam train and a tram, trundled into view on some spotted rails. Hamish urged his companion to rush over and meet these strangers, but Yoko wasn't so sure.
Something's not quite right,
She said, all her senses twitching. Like all Glabdahardit, she had a very acute sense of fear.
We'll have to be quick before they vanish,
said Hamish, waddling up a hill.
Oh,
He cried at the top of the ridge.
they've gone, and so has their machine.
Somehow, though, the sandwiches remained on the ground. Hamish picked them and sniffed them before handing them to Yoko, who decided to keep them for the captain later. Turning round, Yoko could see what Hamish meant. There was no sign of the terrain they had just seen. Just a bunch of smartly dressed argibraffes in top hats who were busy building a railway and a canal. At first she breathed a sigh of relief. This was clearly a sign of civilization. The only thing was, though Yoko didn't know much about either, she was sure they shouldn't be combined like that. The trains kept getting wet, while the boat sparked immensely when dropped onto the rails. "I don't understand it," said an argibraffe. "Where could we have messed up?" "Oh, you there!" he called out to Yoko as she walked past. "I am Isabel Kingdom Argibraftal. Can you make any sense of these plans of mine?" "I don't understand mine either," said a second, who introduced himself as Flankroid Argibraffe. "I can't get this dome to stay up at all."
I think you've got your plans upside down,
explained Yoko, as patiently as she could.
If you turn the dome the other way up, the weight of gravity should keep it down flat, not let it hang in the air like that.
"Oh," said the argibraffitect, scratching his ears. "That makes sense. Thank you."
Same with your pyramid,
She continued.
I don't think the pointy end is meant to be stuck in the ground in quite the same way, you know.
She picked up their lunch, which happened to consist of triangular Toblerone, something that had apparently been invented much earlier on this planet than on Earth, and broke a piece off, turning it the right way round so.
As for this,
Yoko couldn't bring herself to call it a plan.
monstrosity, I think you've got two designs stuck together. The trains and the boat should be separate.
"Mercy me," said Argibraftal. "Of course, it all makes sense now. Yippee, maybe for this they'll let me out of the workhouse and go home." He threw his top hat into the air.
Look,
Said Yoko.
I don't understand what's happening, so I'm just going to back away now, okay?
Absent-mindedly, she put the piece of Toblerone in a knapsack, as she'd been trained to do. Just as she was backing away towards Hamish, who had seemed to have fallen asleep again, the picture changed, and suddenly it had been replaced by a bunch of mock houses and mottle and daub.
I'm having a very weird dream. Is that an argibraffe playing carpet balls?
Asked Hamish, amazed.
I didn't even know they had carpets.
And what are those funny hats they're wearing on their heads?
Squeaked Yoko.
My goodness me, is that a rough round its neck?
Perhaps we should ask one,
Said Hamish. Before Yoko could stop him, he'd run down the rest of the hill to greet the first argibraffe he met.
Good day.
Hamish said, nodding his head at the stranger.
When you here and we're on an expedition with the Well Federation, would you mind if we ask you some questions?
Not at all, said the argibraffe, smiling, lighting a pipe. They'll have to be quick, I'm afraid. The enemy might arrive by sea any moment. Keep your eyes peeled. There might be a bally big boat along at any moment.
Who are you fighting?
Asked Yoko, puzzled. The stranger was most puzzled. Why, the argibraffe Armada, of course. They're here to steal our Virgin Queen. He lowered his voice to a whisper. Though, to be honest with you, between you and me, with all that lead powder on her face, that's not just a nickname. Oh, said Yoko, making notes on a pad.
So your civilization is still in a part of its existence where you fight each other?
She tutted.
That's a shame. That makes you a lower-class civilization.
Lower-class civilization, said the stranger herd. I've been to the New World, I have, and I got this here vegetable. You don't see many of these round here, I can tell you. The figure picked up what looked like a potato and began to light it with his pipe. Yuck, he said angrily. It's all cooked now. What a waste. I can't eat cooked vegetables. He threw it away over his shoulder, where Hamish quietly pocketed it for the captain's table. Look, I'd love to stand here chatting with you all day, continued the stranger. Really I would, but I have to meet with my General Raleigh.
Really?
Said Hamish. No, Raleigh. And with that the stranger had run off and was gone.
What did you make of that?
Heaped Yoko. Hamish was dumbfounded.
What just happened?
He asked.
Was that really a stovepipe hat? With a real stove oven on top?
Yes,
Said Yoko, clapping a small little furry paws into light.
my first alien aliens. We didn't learn much from them to put on my form, though.
She looked down at her notes.
You really have a form?
Asked Hamish.
Of course,
Heaped Yoko.
a good ensign comes prepared for anything. Do you not remember the class we took on interstellar contact?
I remember being there,
Confessed Hamish.
but I may have fallen asleep before the end. Just a little bit.
Yoko sighed.
Maybe we should find someone else to ask.
She pointed over to the horizon.
Look over there.
She pointed towards a wigwam that seemed to have sprung out of nowhere, the other side of a ridge. There was an argibraffe outside it too, covered in war paint, and with a totem pole made up of a depiction of lots of differently coloured argibraffes. The pair were sure the tent of this person hadn't been there earlier, but from the look of him, the figure seemed to have been there for centuries, as he looked old and wise and at one with the earth.
Greetings,
said Yoko.
we're intergalactic explorers from another planet who've just discovered your world. Would you mind answering some questions for us?
How, said the argibraffe in greeting.
Oh, just by speaking to us.
Said Yoko, sharpening her pencil on the nearest totem pole.
For instance, what's that you're eating? We're on an interplanetary mission to discover recipes.
She explained. The stranger took an egg out of his pocket and showed them.
Ooh,
Said Hamish, puffing over the hill several paces behind Yoko.
I think I know how to cook those, thank you.
He said to the figure. How, said the man in greeting.
Boiling, I should think.
Said Hamish, putting the egg in his pocket. Yoko continued, exciting at having her first proper conversation with a being from an unknown world.
Please, if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing sat out here on your own?
The stranger looked up at her. My feet are grounded in the soil to better place me at one within nature and everything that grows across this world, connecting with the future. My head is in the clouds, communicating with my ancestors from the past. My arms are on my weapons, ready to fight our enemies, the argibraffes of the present, who come to plunder our land.
Okay.
Said Yoko, who had just broken a graphite stick.
I wasn't quite quick enough to take all that down. Could you say that again for me, please?
Ugh, replied the stranger.
The same to you.
Shrieked Yoko. Suddenly the figure began to swirl and change colours and go out of focus.
No, wait.
She cried helplessly.
I didn't mean it.
How odd.
Said Hamish, looking around them.
Did I fall asleep and miss a meeting?
No,
Said Yoko.
you just vanished.
She turned her neck around to look all around her.
Along with the surroundings. Again.
She turned her neck around her again and promptly fell over.
I'm scared, Hamish. Where's the nearest table?
Me too. I think it's over there.
Said Hamish. Rather conveniently, a table materialised out of nowhere right next to them.
Oh, good.
Said the Habridat.
This will do. Thank you very much.
Not at all, said the bearded argibraffe with a square crown sitting atop his square head, and even squarer jaw. Wench, some more chicken legs for my guests, he called, throwing a drumstick to the floor, where Hamish pocketed it for inspection by the Dewsbury giants. An argibraffe in a skirt walked into view. Certainly, sire, she said, bowing as she left. One of my serfs, said the king. She lives on my land and works for me in return for doing anything I want.
Ah, I wonder why she was painted blue.
Said Hamish thoughtfully.
Not Smurf, stupid serfs. Woo!
Squeaked Yoko quietly to Hamish.
They still have a monarchy on this planet. That means we must be at the very earliest, most backwards phase of civilization. All intelligent species overthrow the feudal system as soon as they get the chance.
Out loud she asked the monarch.
And what might be your name?
I'm Argenery the Eighth, I am. 7 rulers before me. 5 wives too before the current one. I'm getting a bit bored, Ola. He nodded at the wall where 5 heads were hanging with a space for a 6th and smiled at Yoko. You look rather a sweet little thing. How would you fancy being number 7? She shuddered.
Sorry, sire,
Said Hamish quickly.
she's spoken for.
He meant it as a lie, but his feathers blushed while he said it. Oh well, said the king, suit yourself. Suddenly he began to evaporate.
Wait,
Cried Yoko.
come back. I need to talk to you.
She turned to Hamish.
That was weird. He vanished, just like everyone else did. And where did that table come from anyway?
Maybe the same place as that step pyramid.
Said Hamish, pointing behind them. Hello, said a voice. I was just having some hot chocolate. Would you like some?
Yes, please.
Said Hamish, holding out a flask.
Please pour it right in here. It's custom of ours.
Here you go, said the stranger. Hope you like it.
Gosh, it's strong.
Said Yoko, taking a sip.
Oh, our captain's going to be pleased with this.
Good to meet you, said the stranger. My name's Agricotle.
Wait, Yoko and Hamish.
Squeaked the glad-hearted. Yes, yes, said Agricotle. I know all about you. You are the feathered bird god and the small squeaking rodent god who are due to be sent to our people at our greatest time of need. You're just as the legends describe you. We're the Argstecks. Yoko looked at Hamish, who shrugged. How nice it was to get a civilised welcome at last.
We seem to have fallen on our feet at last.
She whispered to him. Now if you'll just step this way for the great sacrifice, the newcomer said.
Wait, what?
Hamish was aghast, and Yoko began running in circles and leaping loudly. Oh, come now, said Agricotle. It won't take long just to pluck out your heart. Stay up here, please.
No, thank you.
Said Hamish, picking up Yoko and pushing past the figure as fast as his talons would take him. He ran many miles and covered a great deal of terrain until the pair of them were far away from any figures.
Thank you, Hamish.
Puffed the Glabderharded.
I think we're safe now. You can put me down.
Suddenly a flurry of arrows flew over their head.
Wrong again. Out of here now.
Cried Hamish as he whizzed past the rock. Yoko didn't need to be told twice and legged it with him, running as fast as her furry legs could carry her. She cried to no one in particular, more as a comforting automatic reaction. It dived behind a rock and took cover, too late for one blow that hit the Habridat on the head. To his surprise and great relief though, it turned out not to be a weapon, but lunch.
It's hay,
said Hamish, scratching his head.
Well, I guess in the light of this report, we can call it the Battle of Hastings.
We'd better keep it for the captain to analyse,
said Yoko, putting it in her ensign's pouch.
How would you look at that?
Hamish said in amazement. Only he wasn't looking at the argibraffe warriors in cloth tunics and metal helmets that were throwing arrows at them, but at what had been behind the rock. Yoko knew that Hamish wasn't impressed by much, so this would have to be special. And it was. Several bits of parchment had been sewn together depicting the scene of various battles, all of which had been translated for them by their Mechion device. There was Argibraffe the Confessor, sitting on his throne and, well, confessing. There was a series of invasions by the Agra Vikings that had seemed to be successfully repelled. There was King Harold Argibraffe with an arrow going into his eye. And finally there was William the Gronkera, bringing lots of stinky cheese and baguettes with him as part of his invasion. At the top the sign read, the Biarg Tapestry. Some of the cheese and baguettes were next to the sign, so Yoko picked a little bit of them up too.
the Doosmus recipe book.
She explained.
This is incredible,
Said Hamish, taking a device out of his pocket and taking photographs.
all that history laid out before us.
Just as he was looking through the viewfinder, however, the scene blurred again.
Oh,
Said Hamish.
Do stay the couch, darling. That isn't the story of my life.
In the time they looked away, the tapestry had been replaced by a giant stone. The Agrozetta stone, according to the sign at the top, and the ensigns were suddenly outside a pyramid and surrounded by a group of Egyptians.
What's going on?
Asked Yoko.
It's as if someone keeps turning the pages of the history book before we finish the story.
well, I wish we'd turn this one a bit quicker.
Confessed Hamish. The ensigns were standing in front of a group of shop locals. And who, may I ask, might you be? Said a figure. Bow before your queen, and be quick about it, by Bath's getting cold. Hamish instinctively shut his eyes.
Sorry, madam.
He said.
We didn't mean to disturb your ablutions.
Yoko introduced them, apologised for dropping in unannounced, and explained her food-related mission. The stranger introduced herself as Queen Agrapatra. Hamish looked in the bath.
How interesting,
He said.
we all use water at home, but you seem to use milk. How alien.
Said Yoko, getting out the checklist for Dubras is sent to down with.
What sort of milk, may I ask?
An ass, replied the Queen.
No, look here.
Eat, Yoko.
There's no need to be rude.
Unseen, Hamish scooped a part of the bath water and put it into a second flask that he had been given for the mission. Suddenly, without warning, the bath and Queen were gone, to be replaced by a very industrious-looking chap in a bathrobe. Oh, he said, are you my new pupils? I really love the fancy dress. Welcome to my class. My name is Agricopatottle, and I will be teaching you Pythagoras' theorem.
Oh, pies.
Squeaked Yoko.
Yes, please, if you could just pass us some.
No, said the figure hand on hips. It's not about food, it's about triangles.
We're not interested in musical instruments, thanks.
Said Hamish.
But you might want to keep them handy for the Liberation Army shuttle that's cruising across the universe after us.
No, 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 spluttered Agricopatottle. I meant the shape,
Oh, we don't mind what shape.
said Yoko.
Just hand over the food, buddy.
There's no food here, said Agricopatottle. This is a classroom in ancient Greece,
Greece is probably fine.
said Hamish.
Is that like a cooking oil?
Just then their Federation radio crackled into life. Gadzook, said Agricopatottle. What an interesting device. May I see?
In return for some food.
Said Yoko, and got a couple of stale buns in return. Eureka, said Agricopatottle, studying the scientific readings on the reverse. I must go and write these down on some parchment scrolls. But before Yoko could answer the radio call, a bunch of spears came heading their way. After the strangers, cried a helmeted figure. I'll get them if my name's not Agrodicea. Oh, but I was just enjoying my breakfast of stuffed dormouse and honey, said the soldier. We agromans do get awfully hungry, called Yoko, who grabbed at the pot of honey the agroman was carrying and rushed headlong into Hamish's outstretched wings.
Not again,
puffed the Habridat, picking up Yoko and running.
Excellent.
Said Captain Picardman over the radio.
Are you both alright?
not now, Captain.
Yelled Hamish as he dodged an arrow.
We're both a bit busy.
I say, Ensign,
Smiled the captain's voice with approval.
you actually sound passionate about your work for once. Good for you. I always said the big laid-back was holding you back. It's good to hear some ambition in your voice.
My ambition is not being eaten right now, Captain,
said Hamish as he flung himself round the corner.
There are strange argibraffe like alien life forms trying to eat us.
Squeaked Yoko.
Lots of them everywhere, but different in each place we go to.
First things first. Have you got some fruit samples?
The captain asked hungrily.
Yes,
Said Hamish.
the bag's nearly full.
We might have discovered the argibraffe's home knowledge,
Said Spaghetti.
oscillating. Well, keep up the good work, chaps. You seem to have everything under control. We'll have you out in no time. Just as soon as we've finished afternoon tea. It's cold and jam and cream tonight, lovely. Must go, the cream will set if we don't eat it straight away. Over the down.
We're in a bit of a jam right now and you can do something about it.
Replied Hamish.
Jam? After cream? No. You've got so much to learn from the World Federation, you two.
No, don't go.
Peeped Yoko.
Come back.
But there was no reply.
So much for help.
The clapter-hearted squeaked.
I guess we're on our own.
A spear just missed her.
In a manner of speaking.
Quick,
Said Hamish.
round here. Those aliens are too big to fit under here.
Hamish and Yoko dashed round another plastic-looking rock and caught their breath. The agromans hung about outside in their chariot, waiting to pick them off, until they too disappeared.
I guess we're done roaming. What now?
Puffed Hamish.
We're always good at coming up with ideas, Ensign Yoko. We could do with one right now.
I was.
She squeaked.
Oh yes,
Said Hamish.
you're the best. I always trusted your instincts for getting us out of danger.
He grinned at her.
There's a sort of alleyway behind us. As scared as I am of what might be out there, I think it's in our best interest to go and scout around.
Said Yoko thoughtfully.
There might be a better place to shelter, or somewhere we can get to that these argibraffe can't, like crossing a river or a lake or something.
Hamish shrugged.
We might as well get eaten somewhere else as here. Let's go.
They made their way round the corner and found themselves in a wood. The foliage was so lush and thick that it gave them cover, but it also grew dark very suddenly, as soon as they had run into it for shelter. Lots of odd alien noises raged in the background, like a cross between a giant octopus and a rhinoceros that had been charging, but whose credit account had been closed down at the last minute. Lots of little beady red eyes glared out at the pair from all corners of the forest, and the temperature began to drop, making the two ensigns shiver. Cried Yoko, paralysed with fear.
I'm beginning to think that this might not have been such a good idea after all.
It's all right, Ensign.
Said Hamish, taking her by the paw.
Remember our training, right? What doesn't eat you makes you stronger.
Yoko nodded and agreed to be hurried along.
All right, Hamish. Your advice is usually good.
She put a paw on his wing.
I'm so glad you're here. I would hate to be left on my own.
Same here.
Smiled Hamish.
As long as we're together, I feel we can face anything. Which is just as well given the weird goings on we've seen today. Let's hope it calms down a bit from now on so that we can get our breath back.
Yoko suddenly squeaked, her senses on high alert again.
Wait, isn't that a clearing up ahead? What's that noise?
Suddenly a small argibraffe on horseback galloped into view with a net. Yee-haw! She shouted, shooting off a number of pistols over her head as she rode. Yoko and Hamish legged it into the woods, pursued by this strange creature, each of them tripping over themselves, but helping the other up. They darted left, they darted right, but still they couldn't shake off this strange creature.
What is it?
Asked Yoko, on one of the few occasions she had enough puff left to get out a few words. Hamish shrugged.
Looks like an argibraffe to me.
On horseback?
Squeaked Yoko.
Well, we confirm the argibraffes are the equivalent of horses.
"Oh, there you are!" cried the creature as it tracked them down with a long snout. "I'm the rootinest, tootinest, darned gunslinger this side of the Gulf. I'm Calamity Argibraffe, and I ate the sheriff, but I didn't eat the deputy, because he was too quick for me." She came round the corner and promptly fell off the horse. Dagnabbit, she cursed, rubbing her sides where she'd fallen on her makeshift pistol. Note to self before showing off. Learn to ride a horse properly. Other note to self. Remember the horses are big and scary and not like your tricycle. They don't have stabilisers. She looked up at the two ensigns. Hello, she said. Are you playing too?
Yes,
Said Yoko, thinking quickly.
we're playing hide and seek.
Oh, said Calamity, picking herself up. That sounds like fun. How do you play it?
We stay very still and very quiet and try not to get eaten.
Explained Yoko. Oh no, cried Calamity. That doesn't sound like fun. I like games of rootin' and tootin' and shootin'. She got out her pistol again, which the two ensigns could see now was only a toy one, and fired them off again. Yee-haw!
Not so loud.
Shushed Hamish, waving his rings around in panic.
There are multiple argibraffes out there trying to eat us.
Calamity looked intrigued. Really? What fun?
Not fun,
Yoko.
scary in fact.
Calamity thought to herself. It's not nice to eat friends, she concluded. You are my friends, aren't you?
Oh yes,
Said Yoko.
Absolutely.
Agreed Hamish. Come with me, said Calamity, pulling them both up onto a horse. I'll take you back to our village. A kind of alright, really, corral,
Sounds good.
said Hamish, helping his furry friend onto the back of the horse.
oh dear,
Squeaked Ensign Yoko.
I'm not very keen on pie or animals.
Hamish whispered into her ear.
Just remember how far you've come, and you're still here. You're going to be just fine.
Yoko squeaked gratefully, then grabbed Hamish from falling off the back of the horse by his tail.
So are you,
She squeaked.
just as long as you don't get so laid back you fall over.
Calamity and the horse turned the corner, and the two ensigns finally stopped bouncing up and down. Well, here it is, the Wild East, she said. Hamish frowned.
Don't you mean west?
No, said Calamity, confused. I'm pretty sure we're in the East. That's what it says on all the maps, anyway. It's mostly the argibraffe Indians who live in the West, though everybody knows this is nowhere. That was the crazy argibraffe tribe I've just rescued you from down by the river, with his mate Cinnamon Girl. I'm the argibraffe girl in the sand. They all got off the horse, some more successfully than others, and Calamity traipsed into what looked like a saloon. Ma, she cried, I'm home. I brought some friends with me for lunch. Oh, good, called the voice. You're just in time for some fancy cooking. It's high noon at the kind of alright corral. The ensigns froze, given their recent experiences. Lunch? What was it with food in this story? What would you like to eat? Grits? I hope so, 'cause we don't have anything else, Calamity asked the ensigns, and they sighed with release.
Oh,
Said Hamish playfully.
we thought you were going to eat us.
Goodness no, laughed Calamity. We're vegetarians. The ensigns were shown to a little table, where a family were eating a large table of leafy green vegetables. Yippee! Cried Yoko as she dove straight in and grazed.
Thank you.
She said between mouthfuls, as Hamish picked some carrots out for the captain.
The ship we come from gives lots of meals, so we're used to eating lots and lots.
Finishing quickly, she introduced herself and explained the mission they were on, to seek out new food sources and recipes.
But so far all your food seems to look very much like ours.
She finished.
Does it all grow locally?
Oh yes, nodded Calamity. There's a really good strong patch of vegetables that seem to grow really well in the soil at the foot of this old hill. Only it's not like your usual sort of hill. It makes noises. Yoko's ears pricked up at this.
What sort of noises?
She asked, thinking that this was the sort of thing a commander would expect her to investigate. Calamity thought. It's a sort of deep rumbling, a cross between a snore and a gurgle,
Fascinating.
said Yoko to herself before saying out loud.
Can you take me there? I would love to see it.
Sure thing, said Calamity. I was heading my way to play and pick up some more vegetables anyway. Say, you're an interesting sort of critter. You're not like any life form I've ever met before. You're all sort of furry and roly-poly.
Oh yes,
Yoko.
that's me. I come from a different world. And my friend here,
She nodded to Hamish, who was asleep with his beak under his arm.
he's from a different world still.
Calamity looked up at the sky. Weird, she shrugged. We've seen lights in the sky for years. Just this week we even saw what looked like a giant rock blinking in the sky. To think that there are really other creatures out there. Other worlds. She finished her meal and looked up. Well, we'd better go now before it gets dark. Wake up your friend and saddle him to his horse. We have a spare one out back. The trio set off. As Calamity had said, the vegetation nearby was very lush in this part of the planet, and there was indeed a curious metallic building that stuck out against the rest of the landscape it was buried in. If Yoko didn't know better, she would have assumed that it was humming. Her sense of curiosity, larger than her fear for once, Yoko rolled off her horse and went over to investigate, Hamish keeping loyally a few steps behind her. The Glabderhardit looked behind her and grinned.
As long as you're there behind me, Hamish, it's amazing how brave I feel. I'd be in a right state without you, though.
She went on to explore the building.
This is amazing. It's a technology I've never seen before. But it didn't seem to come from any of our planets. And it doesn't look as if it fits with everything else that's here, as if it's just been dropped in from the future. So where did it come from?
She pushed the door, and though it wouldn't open fully, she found that there was enough space to squeeze in underneath it. The place lit up as she walked, each pause step lit by fluorescent lighting that was so bright it hurt her eyes, bouncing off every surface in the room.
What do you see?
Called Hamish.
At the moment, not very much.
She blinked.
But goodness, there are control panels everywhere. And this one over here looks like the control of some primitive rocket. And do you know the weird thing? It all seems to be fully combustible.
Hamish strained to recall one of her lectures at the academy.
Oh, you mean like an internal combustion engine?
He called.
Not really.
Yoko squeaked.
I mean, it's all combustible. It's made of what seems to be weeds and stinging nettles.
She put out her tongue and licked a bit.
Amazing. It's an entirely vegetarian society, far ahead of anything we've got.
She took a tiny piece off the wall and put it in a knapsack for inspection once they were both safely back on board the ship. Next, Yoko looked around, used to this strange adventure by now, and ready to run at the slightest sound. However, the building seemed to be soundproofed, for she missed the kerfuffle going on outside, as first Calamity, then Hamish were carted off by a third group of argibraffes, these ones wearing eye patches and waving cutlasses. Finally, Yoko made her way back out the door.
Hey guys, you'll never believe what I saw in there.
Her voice trailed off as she walked outside, and noted that the horses and her friends were gone. She cried out finally, when after studying the ground and noting signs of a struggle, she realised that they weren't playing a trick on her, and hadn't simply wandered off.
I know I shouldn't have gone in there alone. Curiosity clubbed the Glabderhardit after all. And now my biggest fear is a Glabderhardit. I'm alone. And it's getting dark.
She looked around her miserably as all the red eyes she had spotted in the forest began to grow and glow all around her.
Hands off!
Cried Hamish, trying his best to be unruffled, as he found himself hoisted onto a floating vessel.
Arr!
Cried the first captor.
What if we hear a landlubber by the looks of things?
Actually,
Coughed Hamish, standing up.
I'm a sky dweller by trade. I'll show you if you will tell me.
The captors all laughed, heartily.
Not likely, sonny.
Their leader replied.
We're not letting our breakfast out of our sight, are we, Argibraffe?
He poked at Calamity, who was lying on the floor.
This one looks more normal, but I've never seen anyone like you before, arr.
You wouldn't,
Said Hamish smartly.
I'm new around here. And who might you be?
We be the Argibraffe pirates, arr.
The leader proclaimed.
I'm Rudybeard, and we're the toughest pirates around. Isn't that right, lads? Arr!
They cried as one.
No one can harm us, arr! Now let's have some bread and grog before we make this prisoners walk the plank and feed them to the fishes, arr!
Came the cry around the room. Coughed Hamish as the bread was passed round.
Can I have a bit for this knapsack too? It's an old custom of surrender where I come from.
One pirate shrugged and passed the crusty part of the loaf that nobody ever eats into his bag.
Never say pirates never give you anything. It's all give and take, I say, arr!
He added for good measure. Hamish nodded his thanks, as well as he could, well trussed up like a chicken.
Don't worry, Calamity.
Said Hamish to the argibraffe, who was lying, also tied up on the floor.
They should disappear any second.
Calamity, who'd had a gag put round her mouth, just made muffled sounds at him.
What happened to your
He
eye?
asked Hamish out loud to Rudybeard.
It looks painful. You should see an optician.
What's an optician?
Asked the leader, confused.
They give you things like these.
Said Hamish, trying to remember what was in his pockets.
Ah, here we are. Try one of his monocles. I have a lazy eye, you see.
He explained to no one in particular.
In fact, I've got two. Just have a look in my left pocket.
The leader retrieved them, and looked through one.
What kind of sorcery is this?
He cried.
Are you a magician or a witch, Jim Ladar?
Hamish thought for a minute.
I'm not sure,
He said.
We burn magicians and witches.
Hamish shrugged.
Oh well then, I'm probably not. It's more science than witchcraft.
Roulebeard looked confused.
What be the difference?
Hamish shrugged.
Magicians do stuff on purpose without quite realising how they do it, or scientists do stuff on accident while pretending they know what they're doing.
He concluded.
Is all your planet like this, Arr?
Hamish thought for a moment.
Most of my kind do all sorts of scientific stuff all the time, but most of them probably couldn't explain it to you. Especially when technology stops working suddenly, and you have to turn it off and on again to make it go properly. That's the part that feels like witchcraft to me.
His captors looked confused. Soon Hamish was explaining what he understood of biology, chemistry and physics, ending with a lecture on protons and neutrons. He admitted that it didn't make much sense, and some parts of his knowledge might have been suddenly added onto other parts, but then he had fallen asleep in the lecture.
But we don't have science,
protested the pirate. Hamish nodded.
On the contrary, you do. You just don't know how it works yet.
He somehow pulled a calendar out of his pocket, which had synchronised to the local calendar, a useful app that all Federation candidates had been provided with, not least because it provided a guide to all the local customs and meal times.
For instance, I know the sun is about to go down any second about... Ooh, now.
The sun did indeed go in suddenly just at that second. At the same time, Hamish had managed to get a talon free, and without stopping, picked up Calamity with it and began to run out the door. Yoko was alone on an alien planet. She wasn't good at being alone. Glabdahardits were a communal species who felt that a fear shared was a fear halved, while a fear spent alone was a fear quadrupled. Come to think of it, she wasn't all that good at being on an alien planet. Why had she signed up for this job again, she asked herself. But then she looked up at the stars, and she remembered. With all that life out there to explore, there was no way she was going to spend it hiding under a solitary table all her life. After nervously sending off her intergalactic application, and wishing several times that she had never sent it, her career had been almost fun, for she had been surrounded by a good team of people she had come to depend on. Not her Dewsbury officers, she realised. They were just the first ship that had a vacancy to fill, and their curiosity was purely culinary. But the team of recruits she had trained with, all of whom were eager, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed or golden-antlered accordingly, and most of whom had come on board with her. Especially Hamish, she thought to herself. With him she always felt safe. Not because he was dependable, because Habridats really weren't dependable at all, but he was dependable in his undependableness, she realised. He never argued with her, never questioned her decisions, all made her feel small. Even though as the only Glabdahardit to work for them so far, she was by some margin the smallest recruit the Federation had ever had. No, it was because Hamish had always backed her up, following her unquestionably into whatever she asked him to do, and whenever she felt she'd bitten off more than she could chew, an odd expression to say in a Dewsbury uniform, but true, there he was, unruffled, accepting that she would come up with something to get them out of trouble. Suddenly she realised that they had become a proper little team, and she had never questioned that he wouldn't be there with her, and never considered that they might get separated, and suddenly she felt more scared than she had ever felt in her life. And more for him than her, she realised with a start, given what trouble he might get into without her. Well, she was in over her head this time, and no mistake, and there was no Hamish to help her, so she tried to calm a sense of panic and looked to another source. Maybe those daft Dewsburys had finished lunch, or supper, or Elevenses, or whatever never-ending meal they were on now, and get the transporter working again. Gulping back the stress she was under, Yoko got a radio out of her pocket and thumped it repeatedly, trying to get it to work.
Come in.
Urged Ensign Yoko over the radio as she thumped it repeatedly.
Captain, I need help. Help.
That seems an odd request,
said the cardamom, crackling through the static.
but I shall beam it down to you pronto.
Thank goodness for that.
Said Yoko. Surely help would be here at last, and she wouldn't have to squeak in terror anymore. It sounded as if the Dewsburys had got their act together at last. In her relief, Yoko took back every bad thing she'd ever said about her commanders and their reliance on food. Suddenly a Beatles album in vinyl form materialised in the ether in front of her.
Oh no, they've messed up again.
With a sinking feeling, Yoko began to add a long list of names to those she wanted to use on her commanders.
It's a rather good one, as I recall,
said the captain, reading from a website called Alan's Album Archives.
The film side has some smashing songs, while being bookended by two of the band's best singles, and even the second side has some great confessional songs in amongst the rather rushed covers.
No!
Yoko all but screamed.
I don't want to help the album!
Oh well, why didn't you say so?
Said the captain, and he beamed down a vinyl single.
I'm pleased to see you taking an interest in material comforts, Ensign. I always said you worked too hard.
I don't want to help the single either!
Squeaked Yoko.
I meant I need support!
Back playing up, is it?
Said the cardamom.
Never mind. I did the same when laying the table sometimes. Something is on its way.
A back brace hovered in the air.
Ah!
Yoko stamped her tiny furry feet.
You don't understand! We're in serious trouble!
Well,
Said the captain unsympathetically.
you should have gone to the bathroom before travelling down to an alien planet. Can't you use a tree or something?
I mean, send an away team down here pronto before we both die!
Whooped Yoko down the transistor.
Sir!
She added because she thought she better.
In a moment, Ensign.
Said the captain.
We're just having a lovely spot of afternoon tea. You've only been down a little while after all.
A little while? It had felt like years. The captain was clearly confused and had been on the wine gums again. Yoko supposed that trying to cram that many meal times into a day must do something peculiar to a person's senses. Yoko closed her radio with a sigh and tried to work out what to do instead. She really was utterly alone, emotionally if not physically. And worst of all was that she didn't know what had happened to Hamish, just as she had begun to realise how much she truly cared for him, how much she loved him.
How I wish Yoko was here,
said Hamish to Calamity, as he ran with the argibraffe cowgirl over his shoulder.
She'd know just what to do. Without her, well, I'm a bit useless, really. I would hate for anything to happen to her. And it probably will. She's that sort of a creature, always running into things at the moment's notice, even when it scares the living daylights out of her. I wish I was as brave as she is, particularly when she's scared. If something's happened to her, I'll never forgive myself. I've been trying so hard to keep an eye on her, but she's always volunteering for things, and I can't keep up with her. That's what got us into this mess in the first place.
Behind the gag the argibraffe pirates had put round her mouth, Calamity muffled a reply. Hamish, though, didn't seem to notice. She was heavier than she looked, and he was running out of puff. He also really needed a nap right now. It had been 10 whole minutes, very nearly a record. Hamish wasn't too good at ideas, he realised. He was content to be a follower, not a leader, and that was something he really regretted now, as he ran round and round in circles, trying to work out what to do for the best. Yoko didn't even know where he was, he realised with a start. She might have thought that he had run out on a mission. Or worse, run out on her. And he never even got to tell her he loved her. The realisation hit him with such force that he nearly cried out in pain. That awful thought suddenly seemed worse than just escaping the danger he was in. Running out of options, he finally made up his mind to run over a ridge, and found argibraffes in wigs. Confused, he decided to chance it, and run over to them and ask them for help from the evil argibraffe pirates. One, who introduced himself as Argibravio, looked him up and down distastefully. "Where have you come from?" he asked.
The stars,
said Hamish, pointing upwards. "I knew it," Argibravio cried. "Didn't I tell you, Argileo? There are planets out there, teeming with intelligent life."
Well,
said Hamish, blushing.
I don't know about that. I got decent grades on my coursework, but I must admit I did fall asleep in the entrance exam. It was rather boring, you see.
He suddenly looked at Calamity and put her down, untying a gag.
Sorry,
said Hamish to her.
I forgot. That was something I used to get wrong on the exams too. When rescuing people, it helps if you untie them. Once in training, I forgot to untie Yoko for an hour while I had a nap, and she didn't squeak at me for a week.
"That's all right," Calamity said in trouble. "There's usually a pirate invasion on Thursdays. It happens a lot. I'm kind of used to it."
Anyway,
continued the Habridat,
my friend is in trouble, and we need your help to rescue her.
"Great," said Argibravio. "We'll do everything in our power to rectify the great trouble, uncertainty and stress of your current situation and make you feel better able to cope with the pressure of it. Now, where would you like the painting done?" Hamish blinked.
Come again?
He asked. Well, you said you wanted help, and a mural always helps, I find. Now, how would you like to be positioned on it? With or without clothes on?
Pardon?
Said Hamish.
I mean, I want assistance, physical assistance, so we can rescue her from whatever danger she's got herself into.
Oh, said Argileo, rescue. We know all about that. Here are some of my philosophy books. They're very good when having an existential crisis, I find. He opened a random page and began to quote. I think, therefore I argibraphe.
That's not quite what I...
began Hamish, but Argibravio butted on. Oh, of course, you poor creature. You need comfort from the vastness of the universe in more poetical form. Try writing some haikus with me. An argibraphe lives to conquer mind, body, soul. Coordination. Perfect symmetry between one's snout, mound and tail. A spiritual rush.
What? No!
Stamped Hamish with his talons and making the newcomer drop his book on his own foot. It happened to be a recipe book which the Habridats quietly picked up and stowed away for later.
I need physical help right now. My friend might be in terrible danger.
Ow, I knew I should have only published this in paperback, huffed Argibravio, holding his foot in pain. Oh, we don't do any of that physical stuff, said Argileo to Hamish. That's all far too active for us. You want the agromans down the road, or the agricry kings. They're the ones with the horns.
What is it with this planet?
Asked Hamish, nearly tearing out his feathers.
It's as if every town is from a completely different part of history. Funny too how every planet seems to go through the exact milestones of civilization. But on this planet, every town seems to be going through a different stage all at once.
Yes, said Argibravio. Funny that, for no argibraphe is an island.
All right,
said Hamish.
Where are these Agri-Vikings and Agri-Romans? Maybe they'll talk more sense.
Argileo pointed them out, and then, bored, wandered off to his telescope. To think, he mused, I was right all along. There really are other planets out there. Yoko had wandered off, in the wrong direction as it happened, but then she had no reason to know where Hamish had been taken, and this was quite a small planet, so she would have met up with him eventually anyway. To her surprise, she found herself in a land where argibraphs were busy building things, using hammers and tongs, and with a strange, shiny, metallic substance.
This must be the Bronze Age,
she supposed to herself as she crept slowly through the town. Next she came to a village where the blacksmiths were using a grey substance.
and this is the Silver Age.
She thought to herself. Sure enough, the next land was gold. But what were these lands doing side by side? These communities should have existed centuries apart. She couldn't work it out at all. Next she came across a castle. Or, to be more accurate, she came across a moat by accident, by falling into it, and after thrashing around for a while swam to shore, which turned out to be a castle. Though the portcullis was down, she was small enough to climb between the cracks in it, and set off in search of help. Can I help you? Asked the figure dressed in armour. You seem to be in need of some assistance.
Yes, please.
Beeped Yoko.
You see, I'm an alien, a long way from home, and I'm trying to find my friend. I'm rather fond of him.
Has he been eaten by a dragon? Asked the figure. Yoko thought for a moment.
I don't think so.
She said. Has he been bewitched at all?
Not the last time I saw him.
Yoko admitted. Has he been possessed by demons? Yoko wept.
I hope not.
Would some leeches help?
I don't think so.
Confessed Yoko. That's all right then, said the argibraphe. Those are all the things I'm scared of. If it's something else, then I'm not afraid. Let's go. Oh, yes, he said, reaching out his hand. I'm King Argibraphe Arthur, by the way, and this is Braffelot.
Oh my goodness,
she said to herself in shock, realising where she was.
I'll be glad to have it. In King Arthur's court. It's lovely.
She squeaked out loud.
But wait, isn't this a part of Earth's history? I'm confused.
What is this earth you speak of? Asked the king. It sounds soily. He thought. I rather like soil. Have some broad beans.
Thank you,
said Yoko, nibbling one and pocketing the rest of the captain.
Earth is one of the 11 inhabited planets in the universe.
Said Yoko.
Well, 12 now, I suppose.
She corrected herself.
What's this planet called anyway?
Argibraphe Centauri, said the king. Oh, I didn't know there were other planets out there. How exciting. I suppose that would explain these suits I found lying around. He pointed to a group of spacesuits that were hanging up in a closet. We wonder what they were for. We would have booted them out, but we have lots of space. although I guess the wrong space. He laughed.
This is all mad,
Said Yoko, weeping to herself.
this doesn't seem like a real world at all. There's some sort of construct made by someone at random who doesn't really know what they're doing.
Such is the history of every species, sighed the king. I wouldn't worry about it.
No, I mean, it's as if this planet has been put on fast forward, or reverse.
Said Yoko.
One moment this planet seems really futuristic, and the next it feels like a slip back in time.
Time? Asked the king suddenly, mutating back into an egg. What is time? He called from inside the yolk. I don't understand the concept.
There's a difference between now and either the past or the future.
Said Yoko.
Usually it's one-way street forward, but on this planet it seems to be running backwards.
Ah, said the king, his head peeking out from his shell. I thought it was something like that. It seems a very alien concept, though. Right now. It's funny I seem to have all of tomorrow's memories, and yet I have none for today. For instance, how came I by this throne? And how did I end up talking to you? It's all very strange. Oh dear, he added sadly, looking down at his body. I seem to have lost my kingdom, and my crown, and my clothes, and my sanity. He suddenly turned on Yoko hungrily. You look tasty. Would you like to stay for supper? Yoko squeaked in alarm. Her worst fears had come true. These apparently sophisticated argibraffes had suddenly turned feral. She ran away squeaking. Hamish was also in trouble. He'd managed to find Calamity a hidey hole, but while looking for help had run into a group of cannibals that were obviously feral. They were carrying spears and smeared in war paint that looked a lot like blood, but also smelt like tomato ketchup. He looked on as these strange beings danced round a cooking pot, adding different herbs and spices of alien extraction into a sort of giant cauldron they had created out of bashed bits of rock and stone. It gurgled merrily on top of some week-ended flames.
Fascinating,
Hamish said out loud, by accident. Over in the distance, the creature spotted him. Galumala galugalidlid, said the first argibraphe. Balalahumba, said the second.
Wait,
Said Hamish to himself.
why aren't the Mechion intergalactic translator circuits working? Maybe I'm too far away. I wonder what they're saying. Something savage, I suspect.
Curiosity got the better of him, and he edged nearer. Sure enough, the translator circuit kicked in, and the first cannibal waved at him. I said, oh, I say, chaps, what a dashed capital stroke of luck, called the first argibraphe again. Would you mind awfully coming over here and sitting in our soup for us? It's almost ready, but it's just missing a little hint of flavour. Oh, yes, darling, said the second. Come, be a sport, do. These croutons are going to cook themselves, you know. And we're just a bit peckish for a spot of luncheon right now, as our sacrifices to the great god Baraf seems to have been mislaid. Thanks awfully for giving up your life and all that. Really, it's most terribly appreciated, most appreciated. Good timing, too. I'm rather famished, what? Oh, yes, nodded the first, rather. Hamish stared on from behind his rock, dumbfounded. This wasn't quite what he'd expected, even on this strange planet. Come along, urged the second. The soup tureen isn't going to cook itself now, is it? Ha ha ha! Hamish hesitated before calling out a simple,
No, thank you.
Well, said the first, I like that. I remember when food down the chain used to act like it knew its place. I don't know what supper is coming to nowadays. I really don't. It was worth a try, though. One day our supper is going to jump in our jolly old pot for us, what? I guess I better go and grab my bally old bow and arrow then. Oh yes, indubitably, agreed the second. It's always worth a go asking your dinner to cooperate, though, old sport. One of these days it's going to work asking them that. Oh yes, rather. Oh deeply, oh terribly, yes, ha ha. Hamish wondered what he ought to do to rescue himself. Not that he minded being eaten, really. It was all part of the job, and he had been trained for this along with the other cadets. But still, he couldn't stand the thought of Yoko being eaten, and wanted to stay alive long enough to save her at least. He tried to think calmly, to consider this as just another staff eat training session. Well, he supposed, that wouldn't actually help. The Dewsbury Giants would probably break off and have lunch, because they always taught the cadets never to make big decisions on an empty stomach. But that didn't really seem an option right now. Maybe, though, if he sacrificed himself, they would spare his beloved Yoko. Maybe, too, if he channeled her bravery and intelligence, he could yet get through this. Putting on his loudest voice, and praying the translator circuits would work the other way too, he yelled,
Greetings, I come in peace.
You come in peas? Asked the first argibraffe, confused. Oh no, I don't think that will work with the stew we're making. It would quite ruin the flavour.
No, the Habridat spluttered. I come in peace. I don't want to hurt you.
Oh, said the second argibraffe, that's nice. We don't want to hurt you either. We just want to eat you, and that's quite all right by you, that is. Oh, yes.
Let us come to some arrangement, said Hamish. How about if I agree to give you some former recipes that will make your stew better? Maybe you can leave me alone.
Well, said the first argibraffe, I suppose we could give that some consideration. He turned to his fellow argibraffes and they chatted. Sorry, old bean, he called to Hamish, shaking his head. We've considered your proposal, but, well, you see, we're all bally hungry, you see, and we're not really big foodies. We just eat to fill ourselves up, really. We're not all that big on what the food actually tastes like. After all, it's not every day an alien life form beams down from nowhere and nearly into your soup now, is it? What? Ha ha ha! He chuckled as if making polite conversation after I had just made some faux pas at a social gathering. Now be a good sport and climb in, old chap. We'll try not to make it too hot while we boil you. And we've made a lovely hollandaise sauce to baste you in. You might like to try some yourself sometime. Hamish made a sudden lunge and grabbed some of the soup from the ladle the cannibal was holding out of him and poured it into his final flask.
Oh, said Hamish, that's a shame. I'm afraid I wouldn't be much of a meal. I'm all feathers and bone, you know. I'm most apologetic. I'm going to have to withdraw my offer and run away.
Dashed awkward of you, old chap, called the second argibraffe. The soup's going cold. I suppose there are other means of catching you, though, so we'll be seeing you again. But, well, doodle pip for now. A spear flew through the air, just brushing Hamish's feathers.
On second thoughts, I'm still open to future negotiations,
the Habridat added hurriedly, as he turned and ran as fast as he could. I've never known such an argumentative meal before, complained the first argibraffe. Oh dear, said the second. Now he's legged it. I heard fast food was a thing on this planet, but really, it's most inconsiderate of him. Well, said the first, I guess there's nothing else for it. Go and call the thing. You don't mean, gasped the second. Yes, I do, said the first. Cannibal Lecter. He'll know just what to do with feathery-type creatures. I really hope it's not just Chianti and fava beans again, sighed the second. I'm so sick of that taste. Hamish ran back to where he had left Calamity and legged it as fast as his talons would let him, wondering what the noise on the other side of the hill was. It was Yoko, who was busy dodging a dinobrathe that rose out of the swamp and was trying to eat her. She rushed off to the nearest place of safety, which happened to be in a ditch beneath some trees, as she waited to get her breath back while the dinobrathe, or was it an agrosaurus, lumbered on, breathing fire.
Calamity, is that you?
Cried Hamish in alarm, as he reached the hiding place, and the person that had once been wearing Calamity's clothes turned into a troglodyte. Ugh, mug, mullah, she cried, as she tried to hit him with a club.
I don't understand,
said Hamish helplessly.
A minute ago you were all evolved and normal. Well, as normal as an argibraffe cowgirl on a horse can be. I don't understand what's happening now, though, at all. Maybe if I shut my eyes this will all go away.
So, running out of options, Hamish did just that. To his shock, though, it didn't help. Instead, Hamish could hear Calamity's heavy breathing on his neck as she reached up with a club about to pounce. Oh no, thought Hamish to himself. I'm about to die after all. It was the second biggest regret of my life ending up here on this mission, working for these culinary-obsessed reprobates on this backwards planet just because I was too stupid to say no to anyone. And my biggest regret, that I was never brave enough to tell Yoko that she was the love of my life. Now I guess I'm about to get clobbered by a cave woman, and Yoko will never know how I felt about her. In the distance, Yoko could see what was happening and squeaked in terror. Hamish was in trouble. She had to go rescue him. At the same time, though, all her primal instincts kicked in. She was safe here in this ditch, away from the dinosaurs and cave persons who seemed intent on destroying her and her friend. All she would have to do would be to close her eyes and wait to be rescued. No Glabra-Hearted under any sun would have questioned that happy thought. There was nothing so risky as being caught by something that wanted to eat you, and Habridats were used to being at the bottom of the food chain and having to escape predators. Cowardice came naturally. She had done her best. There was no shame in this at all. Yoko closed her eyes in blessed relief that it wasn't her being eaten, only to then come to her senses. She'd rather that it was her being eaten than the true love of her life. Yoko also knew Hamish wouldn't be able to fend this creature off by himself, but maybe, with two of them, they had a chance. Wait, did she just say love of her life? Did she mean that? Yoko felt a sudden shiver through her body that made all her fur stand on end. Admitting that to herself suddenly meant two things. One, that she would have to confront the fear of rejection, which beat in her heart much stronger than any dinosaur. The other that, if this was the love of her life, she ought to get on with it and rescue him now, before there was no one left to save. Building all her strength up into a ball, and holding it tight, she plunged out into the open and ran, squeaking head first at the cannibal, before running round in circles to lead the argibraffe off the track. Hamish opened his eyes, and was even more surprised to see Yoko than he had been to see anything else this mad day, and instinctively leapt out of the way, just as the cave person formerly known as Calamity threw herself at the beast with a yee-haw! Yoko rushed headlong for Hamish, scooping him up in her tiny arms with the strength of 1,000,000 Habridats. He in turn embraced her as he had never embraced anyone before, laughing at the giddy deliciousness of having been granted a last-minute reprieve from certain death by the very person he had desperately wanted to survive for. As for Calamity, she was now chasing after the creature into the wilderness, waving a lasso that she seemed to have got from somewhere, and grunting. The pair followed the strange sight as far as their eyes would take them, until argibraffe and dinosaur both disappeared over the ridge of a hill.
Well,
Whooped Yoko.
you seem to have been busy.
I could say the same for you,
Grinned Hamish.
I knew you would come to save me.
As I always knew you would be one step behind me,
Said Yoko.
just as you have been ever since we first met at the academy, all those years ago.
What a good job we did too,
Said Hamish.
for if we hadn't met each other, if I'd been with anyone else on this mission, we would have been toast right now. With your brilliance and my resilience, we make quite a team.
The radio in Yoko's pocket crackled into life.
Did someone say toast?
Came Captain Picardumum's voice.
Don't mind if I do. With lashings of peanut butter, please. I suppose I could really do with a report from you both right now, too. Has anything much been happening down there?
I'll say,
Squeaked Yoko.
any chance of rescue anytime soon?
Oh, yes.
Came the reply.
We've been working on that. We have a tractor beam on you both right now. At least I think it's a tractor beam. It could be a combine harvester beam.
Yippee!
Cried Hamish, hugging Yoko tight, much tighter than he'd ever dreamed that he'd be able to, just a few hours earlier on this craziest of crazy days.
There will be just a few minutes delay while we pick up your coordinates,
Continued the captain.
and you can tell us all about how you got on over lunch.
Make that lunch, breakfast, tea, dinner and allowances.
Replied Hamish hungrily.
It's quite a story.
The radio crackled into silence.
What sort of a story, though?
Asked Yoko.
I haven't got the first clue to explain what's been going on to our superiors. There was a castle with a knight, and the argibraffe pirates, and the argy boys, and the Agrindians trying to eat us.
Not forgetting the Renaissance and the ancient Egyptians.
Continued Hamish.
It's weird.
Heaped Yoko.
It's as if all time got muddled up, and we were experiencing everything at random.
Oh, I know what's happening.
Yelled Hamish suddenly.
I wish I did.
Heaped Yoko.
Time's been running backwards.
Explained Hamish.
We weren't travelling through different localities at all, but different time streams, so every argibraffe colony we came across belonged to a different point in their social evolution. That's why we've ended up running away from the cave woman and dinosaurs at the end. Weird, they seem to have had the same evolutionary arc as the humans.
But what caused it?
Asked Yoko. Hamish blushed.
I think I might have done.
What?
She said.
You? How?
I think I must have plugged the ship's new microwavable engine in the wrong way round.
He admitted.
Instead of zooming forwards in space while bending the laws of time, we seem to have gone backwards in time while bending the laws of space. Or something like that.
But the device shouldn't even be switched on yet.
Said Yoko.
Ah,
Said Hamish.
you remember that big button that stuck out the side panel? I think I might have knocked that bit just a teensy weensy bit when somebody shouted my name. So all of this was my fault.
He looked up at Yoko with panic in his eyes. Suddenly this was now the new scariest moment of his life, and he'd rather have been eaten by 10 dinosaurs than face up to this.
You don't hate me, do you? It was an accident. I didn't mean to. I would hate any harm to come to you.
Shush! Yoko said, moving a paw so that it was over his wing, and moving it up to his lips. Then she giggled.
Of course I don't hate you. This is the most fun you can have with your fur on. This is what I dreamed of when I left home. I think it's fair to say that we've learned more about argibraffe civilization and culture in the space of the past hour than historians have in centuries.
Oh, good,
said Hamish, hugely relieved.
That wasn't the only thing I learned today,
said Yoko.
Oh,
asked Hamish.
What?
I learned that you're always there to rescue me when I get in too deep. I learned the sheer panic that comes from thinking that something might have happened to you. Oh, and I learned that I'm never ever going to rely on you to plug any piece of equipment in ever again.
She laughed a high-pitched, eepy sort of laugh.
Me too,
said Hamish.
I learned that you're always there for me, no matter how scary it is or how afraid you are. We make a good team, Ensign.
We do, Ensign,
smiled Yoko.
I learned something else too, that you have to be brave and make the most of things and people in your life before they pass you by. You don't get to take your safety or those you love for granted in this job, and Hamish, there's something I have to ask you.
That's funny,
said Hamish.
There's something I've been putting off asking you too. You know, I only joined up to the Star Eat Academy because of you.
You did?
She squeaked.
Sure, he said. Ever since I first saw your profile in Intergalactic Dating, I vowed that I would follow you to the ends of the universe and go wherever you did. I didn't really know what to do with my life anyway, so it made as much sense to follow you living your best life as half-heartedly living mine.
Because of me?
Squeaked Yoko.
Why?
Because I wanted to keep you safe,
said Hamish.
No matter where you went or what you did, I wanted to be there to protect you, because you mean the universe to me. Still do.
We took the whole course together. It lasted 11 years. You never said a word.
Yoko wept in surprise. Hamish shrugged.
I guess I never got round to mentioning it.
He yawned.
But I only joined up to this crew so I could have something to put on my ID profile and impress you.
Squeaked Yoko.
You were such a handsome Habridat. I thought it was the only way to get you to notice me. I got the shock of my life when I was sent out here, and another happier shock when I found you'd been accepted here alongside me. I wanted to impress you by doing something daring, to prove I was more than just another quaking glad harlot hiding under a table.
She looked around her.
I really admired the way you conducted yourself at the academy. So unflappable in any situation. I know I should have said something more direct, but I was scared. I guess that really backfired on me, huh?
Hamish shrugged.
A human saying hello might have been better.
The pair of them laughed.
At least it's out in the open now,
said Hamish.
I knew something would happen if I waited long enough and stayed patient.
Well, I'm glad that's sorted,
said Yoko.
I would have hated to have died with that unsaid.
That's amazing,
said Hamish.
I'll admit something else too. I only signed up to Intergalactic Dating because of you. I even got a Camalosian buddy of mine to do the paperwork for me because I kept falling asleep filling the forms in. I always meant to send you an anonymous message on there, but I never quite got round to it. I just procrastinated until I ran out of time.
I knew you were on it,
squeaked Yoko.
but I was never brave enough to send you a message either.
They both laughed.
Gosh,
said Hamish.
To think then, if we'd been brave enough to say what we felt originally, then we might have been spared this entire experience and be happily settled on some planet or other right now.
It's not too late for that,
said Yoko.
Let's keep it quiet for now so that we can enjoy our time together without anyone else knowing. But then we could ask for transfer to your planet or mine, or on another completely new world. Start a new life somewhere, without quite as much emphasis on food. You know, if you're still interested in Squeaky Ball of Fluff.
Of course, if you're still interested in this bundle of feathers,
Hamish thought.
But which of us is going to be brave enough to ask for the first?
Maybe if we ask together,
squeaked Yoko, shutting her eyes tight.
Will you?
Will you?
Go out.
Go out.
With me?
With...
Close enough.
laughed Yoko, taking the Habridat by the wing as he fell asleep suddenly again.
Mission accomplished. Now let's go to the holodeck when we get back on board. I never did see that argibraffe film, Our Trek, The Bath of Calm. I hear they shot it underwater.
Good idea,
Said Hamish. Then he suddenly looked really panicked and stressed.
What?
Squeaked Yoko, making a dash for a table. She was really getting to know Hamish's reactions by now.
I've just realised.
Groaned Hamish.
The captain's going to expect a report on the events of today, isn't he? That's going to take forever.
Silly Habridats.
Squeaked Yoko.
We'll write it together. We could do everything together from now on.
She looked up at the stars.
Just think, anything is possible now. Is it just me, or are those stars shining brighter suddenly?
Oh,
Admitted Hamish.
I've got no time to look up at them,
Why not?
Teach Yoko.
because I'm too busy looking at you.
Smiled Hamish, and he leaned in expectantly for their first kiss. Just at that very moment, without warning, the pair were finally beamed back aboard the SS Enchilada prize. Suddenly, mid-kiss, they became aware that they were being applauded, with the occasional wolf whistle.
Looks like something's cooking.
Said Spaghetti with a smile. "Och, there'll be a bun in the oven soon for sure," grinned Scotty Shortbread.
So much for keeping our feelings quiet.
Blushed Yoko. Oh, grinned Hamish.
I think we've kept things quite long enough, don't you? Life is short but cute, just like you.
So saying, he swept Yoko into his arms.
Did you get any recipes while you were on the planet?
The captain asked. Hamish handed the one book he managed to find over, before Yoko squeaked.
Mostly we spent our time trying not to get eaten. We seem to be at the bottom of the food chain there, you see.
We might be able to get more in a minute, though,
Said Hamish.
when we've had time to evolve.
Ah, said Captain McCardamom sympathetically.
That's not good, but at least there's a chance for our successors to return and make contact with their recipe books.
Actually, sir,
Whooped Yoko,
I think it will only take a few minutes.
Oh, and sir,
added Hamish, bringing out their pouch and flask.
we managed to get a great number of food samples for you.
Fantastic. Well done, Ensign.
Smiled the captain.
I shall see that you both get the decoration of hundreds and thousands for this, the greatest award that Doosmus could bestow. Until today, only Dewsbury Giants have ever been awarded this prize.
He pinned a huge oversized badge with a circle of overlapping baguettes covered in sprinkles onto both of the ensign's tunics. Yoko eat proudly from behind the badge, but was twice as big as she was, enjoying the happiest moment of her life. Or Hamish shrugged nonchalantly.
More to keep clean.
He sighed. Captain Picardamom continued.
I think we ought to try this mysterious culinary delectations as well as storing them, in the name of science, of course. This calls for a celebration banquet.
At this pre-programmed cry, a million foodstuffs began to defy gravity and levitate and dance throughout the ship as they landed on outstretched tables, waiting to be eaten.
Go on, you two eat. You've earned it.
The captain continued.
We haven't.
Squeaked Yoko, dodging flying meatballs and rushing towards the microwavable shuttle button.
What do you mean?
Asked Captain Picardamom.
If it's about the aliens on that planet of yours, they've all gone quiet. No need to worry about them.
He looked at the ship's computer, minimising all the open apps from delivery giants Deliver Dewsbury.
Very quiet, actually. There are hardly any life forms there at all now. Where did everybody go?
People did tend to keep coming and going.
Squeaked Yoko as she righted the lever.
What happened?
Asked the captain, confused. Hamish coughed.
I don't really want to say.
Spaghetti studied the microwavable control panel and raised his eyebrows.
I see. This quantum drive machine seems to have been in reverse mode all this time.
Oh,
Said the captain, working things out in his head.
then how come all those people disappeared, and the food and drink we brought with us is still as fresh as when we got it? Isn't that the wrong way round?
Oh, said Scotty Shortbread, my fault. You see, I was trying out a new machine to preserve food to make it last longer, which is an important commodity on the Dewsbury ship sent into space. Only I wired that up to the wrong machine, so that it was projected onto the planet too, as if everything was being preserved in a gigantic Tupperware. Oh,
That's ridiculous.
said Hamish.
Logical.
Added Yoko. Spaghetti raised an eyebrow, and his left ear, right ear, and his final front ear.
So you mean everyone on the planet? They're all gone?
asked the captain.
Everyone devolved into nothing? But they had such lovely recipes we could have learned from.
Hamish coughed.
I don't think they've gone completely. Maybe you should magnify your machine.
The cardamom scratched his bald head, but did as he was told.
I don't see what you mean.
He said.
Literally, there's nothing there.
Try again, on your maximum magnification,
flapped Hamish, unusually ruffled. The cardamom was even more confused.
All I see are argibraffe. They're spotted with long necks and kinda cute. But where do the argibraffes go?
Those are the argibraffe,
said Yoko, fiddling with the back of the machine.
They are? Really?
Captain Cardamom blinked and checked the strength of his teeth.
Well, I never. Ensigns, I have to say, that's a lot of food for thought you've given me there.
Oh, there we go.
Yoko winked, and suddenly the machine changed colour and emitted a loud ping, with everything moving forwards again.
Phew,
sighed Yoko, collapsing into Hamish's wings.
I think we did it just in time before we all disappeared into nothingness. That would have been an awful blot on my records if we'd accidentally destroyed the first intergalactic species we'd come across.
Hamish looked down at the surface through the magnifier and saw a couple of neanderbraffs waving at him.
I think it's going to be all right after all.
He grinned.
All the same, we'd better keep an eye on this machine so we can stop it at just the right moment of civilization, such as the skyscrapers we saw when we came.
I'd better do it,
squeaked Yoko.
I know having you fall asleep again, but when you wake up these argibrafes will be more civilised than us.
Would anyone like to tell me just exactly what's been going on?
asked Captain Cardamom.
Well,
said Hamish.
It's rather a long story, sir.
That's all right.
Said the captain, resting back in his chair.
Take your time. I've made lots of popcorn. Oh, we saved all our dishes from earlier for you to wash up later.
We better take our time then.
Deadpanned Hamish, holding Yoko's paw.
You see, sir?
Squeaked Yoko, holding Hamish's wing back.